and that you had an amazing day. All right, so for today, we're going to go onto our lesson for, it's going to be a grade 4 lesson on irregular past tense, right? So it is a English grade 4 lesson on irregular past tense. So before we start, you are going to go onto the aplusstudents.ca. Once you go onto aplusstudents.ca, you're going to log in with your username as well as your password. All right, so once we've logged in with our username as well as our password, you're going to select the subject of language arts. And then we go to grade 4, right? All right, so in our previous lesson, we did regular plural nouns. So regular plural nouns, right? So our chapter for today is going to be on irregular plural nouns. All right, so our chapter for today is irregular plural nouns, and the lessons that we're going to be focusing on is, oh no, sorry, not irregular plural nouns. We are going to the irregular past tense. I apologize. So irregular past tense. So the chapter of today's irregular past tense, right? And on our previous lesson, we did regular past tense, right? So today we are actually going to see the difference between regular past tense, where we basically just had to follow a rule where you either add ed or d to a specific word, right? And now we are going to see how the word actually changes, right, when it comes to irregular past tense, right? So the lessons that we're going to be focusing on under the chapter of irregular past tense is identify irregular past tense, to form and use the irregular past tense, and then we are going to focus on a few different ways in which we can form and use irregular past tense. There will be about 4 steps to that. So before we continue and go on with anything else, let us go to our lesson, which is to identify the irregular past tense. All right, so most verbs are regular in the past tense. And I mentioned earlier on, based on our previous lesson, right, where we did regular past tense or regular verb, you basically follow a rule like adding either an ed to a verb or adding a d to a verb, right? So that is basically the rule. So it is if you have play and then you just add ed and then it changes to played, right? Which is a regular past tense verb. Um, so that is the rule basically that you have to follow with most regular past tense verbs, right? So this means that you follow a rule like either adding ed or adding a d. So we add a d if the verb ends with an e, right? To get the past tense form of the verb. But now, some of the verbs are irregular in the past tense, right? And this means that you don't have to follow a specific rule. Instead, you must just remember the past tense form of the verb, because some of the verbs or the wording basically changes completely, right? So it will maybe change from, let's say, did to do, for example, you know? So it's not just a rule or standard rule that we follow where the word still stays the same, right? For example, that I made was play, right? So if we maybe have a word like play, this is not the regular verb, right? Past tense verb is, for example, play, right? So which makes it more easier is the fact that we just follow the rule, and in the past tense or the regular past tense verb, it's just by adding an ed and it becomes played, right? But now with the irregular past tense verb, certain words are even going to change, right? Or certain wordings or letters within that specific word might change. That is why they're saying that you do not follow a specific rule. Instead, you must just remember the past tense form of the verb. All right. And an example is Louis did his homework. So, did, right? Did his homework. So, did is the irregular past tense form of do, right? So, did, it is the irregular past tense form of do, right? So, instead of saying do and doed, right? Because we don't say dude, right? I do and I dude. So we don't say dude, right? Because it just does not make sense. It does not sound the same, right? So instead, we say did, right? So it basically changes from the word do to the word did, right? So as we can see, a few letters within that wording has changed. No rule that we need to follow. All right, if we now look at the one sentence, right? It says which sentence is in the past tense? Lisa draws a picture of Harold, right? So which means that the word that is in bold, which is draws, we need to change this word to the past, right? So it says that both sentences use the form of verb draw, right? So Lisa draws a picture of Harold, right? So if we change that form of verb to the past tense, right, then it means that the irregular past tense form will be drew, right, which is drew. So not draws, we can say drew. So the first sentence uses the verb drew, which is the past tense form of draw. So draw, drew. Bless you. And it is irregular, right? So the word draw, right? The irregular past tense verb of draw is drew. As we can say, we did not add an ed, we did not add a d in order to show that it is a rule that we follow, right? Because we can't say drawed, right? It is drew. So Lisa draw. In the past, Lisa drew a picture of Harold, right? And that is why they say it is you can't basically follow a specific rule. Instead, you must just remember what the past tense form of the verb is. And sometimes most of us, whenever we speak, we still speak in a manner in which we don't use the proper forms of the past tense or the verbs or the forms. um but that is why they say you just have to remember what the past tense form of the verb is, right? Because there's no specific rule that you need to follow. So, which means that in this sentence, the word draw or draws, right? The past tense or the irregular past tense form of draws is drew, not drawed, it is drew. All right, so which sentence is in the past tense? Raymond's favorite toy breaks. Raymond's favorite toy breaks, right? We need to choose the correct past tense form of the word breaks, right? So, breaks. Remember, we said that when it comes to irregular past tense verbs, there's no rule that we need to follow, right? So, which means that breaks, see, the irregular form of breaks. So, breaks, it shows The present tense, it's happening now, something that's happening now, right? And the irregular past tense form of verb of breaks is broke, right? It is broke. So which means that Raymond's favorite toy broke. Or we can say yesterday Raymond's favorite toy broke, right? And as you can see, that word literally changed from breaks to broke, right? E A, we remove that, we put the O there, we remove the S, we put the E. So as we can see, certain letters or wordings has changed within that specific word. No rule that we follow. You just need to remember what the past tense form of that verb is, right? So Raymond's favorite toy breaks. Yesterday, Raymond's favorite toy broke, right? So broke is the irregular past tense form of break. After the touchdown, the team wins. So after the touchdown, the team wins. We need to basically get the past tense form of the word wins, right? So wins, it changes then to the word won. So wins happens now, or win, right? So wins or win, it is now, right? But the past tense form of win or wins, let's say win, right? It is won, right? So the past tense form of win, it is won. So win changes to its past form of won, and won is the irregular form or the irregular past tense form of win, right? So as you can see, the wording has changed, right? It has changed from win, which is WIN, to won, which is WON, right? So not wind, winded, no, right? It is from win to the past tense form of won, right? And once again, irregular past tense forms, it does not have any rules that you need to follow, right? Instead, you must remember the past tense form of the verb, right? And that is where the difference comes between regular past tense forms and irregular past tense verbs. Because with regular past tense forms or verbs, there is a specific rule that you follow where you either add ed or d to the specific verb, right? However, with the irregular past tense form or verb, there is no specific rule that you follow. Instead, you must just remember what the past tense form of the verb is. All right. So now we are going to a test, right? We're going to test ourselves on identifying the regular past tense forms of the verb based on the lesson that we just covered. All right, so which sentence is in the past tense? We meet our new neighbors, or we met our new neighbors. So is it meet or met? So we meet our new neighbors, that shows in the past tense, or we met our new neighbors. We need to choose the correct, or we need to choose which sentence is in the past tense. We meet our new neighbors, or we met our new neighbors. All right, so if we were to choose the correct sentence that is in the past tense, and remember specifically irregular past tense, and then we are going to say we met our neighbors, our new neighbors, right? So meet, it changes. So meet, the, the past tense form of meet is met. The player catches the fast ball, or the player caught the fast ball. So it's basically finding the correct past tense form within that sentence, or which sentence is the past tense, is in the past tense. The player catches the fast ball, or the player caught the fast ball. Which is the correct past tense form? Catches or caught? All right, so if we were to select the correct sentence that shows the past tense, then we will say caught, right? Because the past tense form of catches is caught, right? All right. Which sentence is in the past tense? Carrots grew in my garden, right? Or carrots grow in my garden. We need to choose the correct one. Is it grew in my garden or grow in my garden? We need to select which sentence is in the past tense, and specifically irregular past tense form. Carrots grew in my garden or carrots grow in my garden. We need to select the correct sentence. Grew or grow. All right, so if we choose, or if we were to choose the correct sentence in the past tense, specifically irregular past tense form, then we will say it is option one, which carrots grew in my garden, which means that grew is the past tense form of grow, right? All right. So now before we go on to form and use the irregular past tense forms, right? Um, let us quickly do a little activity, right? All right, so we are now going to match the verbs, right? We are going to match the present tense verbs on the one side to the past tense forms, right? And remember, we said when it comes to irregular past tense verbs or irregular past tense forms of the verbs, right? Then there is no specific rules, right? For example, the present tense see, right? Is double E, right? So the past tense or the irregular past tense form of see is saw, right? So it's like the wording changes, right? There's no rule that we need to follow. You just have to know what the past tense form of that verb is, right? So we are going to now match the present tense verb with the past tense verb. And the first one was done already for us, right? So rise. The past tense of rise is rose, right? Then we have think. We need to match the we need to match the present tense verb with the past tense form. So think, right, is thought. I think about my homework. Earlier on, I thought about the homework that I need to do. So think, thought. Do. I do my homework. But earlier on, I did my homework, right? Then we have make. Make and made. I made my bed, right? Sleep. The baby sleeps, right? But earlier on, I slept. So sleep, is the present tense verb, and the past tense form is slept, right? Go, just see how go changes. So go is the present tense, right? And the past tense form of go is went. I go to school, right? Yesterday, I went to school. Or I go to the park. Yesterday, I went to the park. And then we have run and ran, write and wrote, see and saw, right? And that is basically just how the irregular verbs or the wording changes, right? And remember, we said with irregular past tense verbs, there is no specific rule that you have to follow. You just have to know what the specific word or meaning, not even the meaning, what the word is in the past tense form. All right, so now we're going back to our tutorial, and now we are going to form and use irregular past tense, right? We're going to the first one. All right, so with us forming um past tense, right? Remember, if we just recap on regular as well as irregular past tense, right? Most verbs are regular in the past tense, and we said with regular verbs, there is a specific rule where you either add ed or you add d, right, to get the past tense form of the verb. But with irregular, right? Some verbs are irregular within the past tense, right? And that means that you do not follow any rules. Instead, you must just remember the past tense form of the verb, right? And here we have an example. We have an example, right? Or before we go to the example, let us go to complete the sentence with the verb, right? It says, my brother lose a tooth. So if you lose a tooth, we need to find the irregular past tense form, or we need to find the past tense form of that word lose. So lose. My brother lose a tooth, right? Which means that the irregular past tense form of lose is my brother lost a tooth. So lost a tooth, right? So as you can see, the word changed from lose to lost, right? So to lose something, right, it is irregular. So the past tense form is lost. I spend $5 at the store. I spent $5 at the store. We need to change that word spend to the past tense form. So if I spend $5 at the store, then it means that the past tense form of spend will be I spent $5 at the store. So basically, only the D changes to a T. So I spent $5 at the store. Yesterday, I spent $5 at the store. We pay for our tickets and then we went to the show. So we pay for our tickets and then we went to the show. So the word pay, we need to change that word to the past tense form. So pay. All right, so the verb pay or to pay, right? It is irregular, right? So if we change that word to the past tense form, then we can say that, we pay for our tickets and then we went to the show. Earlier on, we paid paid, and see how the word changes. Paid for our tickets and then we went to the show. Not pay ed. Nope, that is incorrect, right? So the word pay, pay, it changes to paid and not payed. So this is incorrect. So which means that the word pay, it changes to the past tense form of paid. So we paid for our ticket and then we went to the show. Paid. All right, so this is but a few forms and uses of irregular past tense forms or verbs, right? It is just where the wording changes or the verbs changes, right? Because it specifically shows that the verbs are irregular. And we say that if the verb is irregular, then it does not have a specific rule that you need to follow, right? The wording also changes or letters changes within the letter of that verbs, right? Especially if you are changing it to the past tense form, right? So you just have to remember what the past tense form of the verb is because there is no specific rule that you have to follow. All right, let's go to our little test, or let's test ourselves to see if we can form and use irregular past tense verbs. We need to complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense. Abe paid the water bill on the first of the month, right? So pay, is it option one, which is paid, or option two, which is pay, right? We need to change that word pay to the past tense, right? So is it paid, which is the first one, or pay? We need to choose the past tense verb of the word pay. All right, so if we choose the past tense form or the verb of pay, then we can say Abe paid the water bill on the first of the month. So paid. So if you have paid, then well done. Anthony bent over to tie his shoes. Bend, right? So we need to choose the correct verb that shows the past tense, right? Is it bent or is it a bend? So Anthony bend or bent over to tie his shoes. Bend or bent. Okay, so if we were to choose the correct past tense form of the word bend, right? And then that word is going to change from bend to bent. He bent over to tie his shoes. So bent is, it shows irregular. Lucy spent 3 hours at the museum. Spend 3 hours at the museum. So Lucy, is it spends 3 hours at the museum or Lucy spent 3 hours at the museum, right? This verb is irregular. Spends or spent. All right, so if we choose the correct verb, right, then we will say Lucy spent. She spent 3 hours at the museum, right? So that verb is irregular, right? There's no specific rule that it follows, right? And it basically just changed each wording. Now we're going on to the next set, which is also to form and use irregular past tense, right? where we are going to change the word to the correct irregular past tense verb or form. We ring the pretty silver bells. We ring the pretty silver bells. Bells. So ring. So if we change the word ring to the past tense, right, then that word is irregular ring, which means that the past tense form will be rang. So ring, right, ring changes to its past tense form or verb to rang, right? We rang the pretty silver bells. We ring it now, but earlier on we rang the pretty silver bells. Not we ringed it. No, we don't say ringed. We rang the pretty silver bells. All right. The girl become happy when a friend walked in. The girl become happy when a friend walked in. We need to change the word become to the irregular past tense form of verb. Become, right? So become will then change to, so become changes to the past tense of became. See, so a, the O basically changes to an A. So become changes to became. The girl became happy when a friend walked in. So the past tense or the irregular past tense form of that verb, which is become, changes to became. I invited Hector to dinner, but I forget to tell mom. Forget. We need to change that word forget to the irregular past tense, to the past tense. Forget. I invited Hector to dinner, but I forget to tell mom, right? Which means that the word forget, forget, the past tense or the irregular past tense form of the verb is forgot. So if we now add the word forgot, then we can say, I invited Hector to dinner, but I forgot to tell mom, right? So forget, forgot, right? And forgot is the irregular past tense verb of the word forget. All right, so now we're going to the test, right? We need to complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense. I write a secret message for my sister. We need to change that word write. Is it either to wrote, or we need to choose the correct past tense verb? Is it wrote or write? I wrote a secret message for my sister, or I write a secret message for my sister. All right, so if we were to choose the correct form of verb, which is in the past tense, right, of write, then we will say that the irregular past tense form of the word write is I wrote a secret message for my sister. So which means that it is the option one, wrote. So write changes to wrote. Lexi ring Seth's doorbell. Lexi ring Seth's doorbell. We need to change the word ring to the past tense form of that word. So is it ring? Lexi ring Seth's doorbell, or Lexi rang Seth's doorbell, right? And remember, these verbs are irregular, so we need to change it to the irregular past tense form. So we need to find the irregular past tense form of ring. Ring. Is it ring or is it rang? All right, so the irregular past tense form of ring is rang, which means Lexi rang Seth's doorbell. So it's like as if the word changes, right? The stray kitten become our new pet. So the stray kitten become our new pet. We need to choose the correct verb, or let's say the verb within the past tense. Is it became or become? So became or become. We need to choose the correct form of verb which shows the past tense. Became or become. All right, so become is irregular, right? Which means that the irregular past tense form of verb of become is the first option, which is became. So the stray kitten became our new pet. So if you have that, then well done. All right, so far we have been using different irregular past tense, right? So we've been forming it as well as using different irregular past tense verbs, right? And we specifically putting more emphasis on forming and using irregular past tense forms because remember we said that there is no specific rule that we need to follow when it comes to the irregular past tense forms, right? You just need to know the word, right? So the wording will change from one word to another word specifically because that verb will be irregular, but there's no specific rule that we will follow, right? The only time we follow a specific rule in is with the regular plural verbs, regular past tense verbs, sorry. With the regular past tense verbs, we basically follow a rule where we either add ed or d depending on the specific word. But with irregular past tense forms or verbs, we do not follow a specific rule. You just basically need to know what the word is, right? Or what the past tense form of that verb is. All right, let's go to the third set. Okay, so I literally like explained now the difference between regular and irregular past tense, right? And an example we also have is Alex bought a gift, right? So Alex bought a gift, right? So which means that the word bought, the verb or the irregular past tense form bought, right? It is the irregular past tense form of buy. So bought is the past tense form of buy, right? So as you can see, the word even changed, right? From buy, B-U-Y, to bought, right? Which is in the past tense. Okay, so now we need to complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense. The townspeople fight to keep the land from being developed. So the townspeople fight to keep the land from being developed. We need to choose the correct past tense form of the word fight. So fight in the past tense. All right, so the word fight, right? So if we were to choose the correct word, or let's say the past tense form of the word fight, then the past tense of fight or to fight is fought, right? So fought. The townspeople fight, the townspeople fought, which means that the irregular past tense form of fight is fought, right? So not fighted, right? It is fought. The blanket Vondra buy should keep her warm. So the blanket Vondra buy should keep her warm. So we need to change the word buy to the past tense. And buy is irregular, right? So which means that if buy is irregular, then the past tense form of buy is bought. So buy is irregular and the past tense form of buy is bought, right? So Vondra, the blanket Vondra buy should keep her warm. But in the past tense, the blanket Vondra bought, Bought, should keep her warm. They catch the thieves who robbed the bank. So they catch the thieves who robbed the bank, right? We need to choose the correct past tense form of catch. And remember, there's no specific rule. We're not adding ed, we're not adding d, right? You just need to know what the past tense form of that word catch is, for example. All right, so catch, right? So catch is irregular. So catch is irregular. And the past tense or the irregular past tense form of the word catch is caught, right? And they caught the thieves who robbed the bank. So caught is the irregular past tense form of the word catch. All right, so now we are going to test ourselves again on forming and using irregular past tense. We need to complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense. Have you buy anything from that store? So have you buy anything from that store? We need to choose the word either bought or buy, right? Where we are changing the word to the past tense, right? So buy is irregular. So if we were to change the word buy, which is irregular, to the past tense form of that specific verb, then we will say it is bought. So have you bought anything from that store? Bought. And if you have bought, then well done. At the champion game, we fight harder to win than ever before, or we fought harder to win than ever before. We need to choose the verb in the past tense. Is it we fight or we fought? And fight is irregular, right? Which means that the past tense form of that verb of fight is fought, right? At the Champions game, we fought harder to win than ever before. If you have fought, then well done. I think about nice things Pamela does for me, right? So we need to change the word think. Is it think or is it thought? So think or thought. I think about the nice things Pamela does for me. And think is irregular, right? Which means that if we change the word think, which is irregular, to the past tense form, right, of that verb, then we will say that thought is the past tense form of think. So I thought about the nice things Pamela does for me. So thought, which is correct. So if you have thought, then well done. All right, so that is basically the end of our lesson on irregular past tense, right? And we said with the irregular past tense, there is no specific rule that you have to follow when we change, let's say, the word into the past tense, right? There's no specific rule. You just have to know what the word is, right? Or how the word changes, right? From, let's say, a present tense form to the past tense form, specifically the irregular past tense form, right? And we said a regular past tense verb, it has rules. It follows a rule where we add either ed or d. But with irregular, there is no rule that we have to follow. You just have to know what the word is, right? So that is now the end of our lesson, grade 4. Thank you very much for joining the class. You should have an amazing evening further. Goodbye.